Welcome to the O Show, your number one podcast for everything training, mindset, and nutrition. I am your host, Oren McCarry, and it is my goal to help you access the best information around to allow you to kick ass in the gym, in the kitchen, and most importantly, in your head. Between my own experiences and those of my amazing guests, I'm confident we will do that. So let's strap in and level up your life starting right now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, guys, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to today's episode of The O Show. I am your host, Oren McCarry, and here as always with a lovely guest for our Friday interview. And we have the amazing Lizzie on from Flex Success. How are you today, Lizzie?
I'm very good, thank you.
This has been one I've been lining up for a while. We talked back and forth, and then I think I flaked on getting back to you about it. And we finally locked this one in, and this is going to be coming out for the start of July. So I'm very excited about this. If people recognize the name Flex Success, it's because your partner, Dean, business partner, life partner, has been on the show multiple times, and he's got that trophy of being in the top 5. 3 of his episodes have been in the top 5. So the people might recognize the Flex Success name. But obviously you're a different side of that, right?
Yeah, so Dean and I are two sides of Flex Success, although we've got some other coaches working in it as well. I feel like I have some big shoes to fill if he's been in your top 5. I'll do my very best. Dean works with competitive athletes, specifically male, untested physique athletes, whereas my background has always been working one-on-one with Gen Pop or general population. And the approaches are very different because Dean's trying to get someone, for lack of a better term, dick skin lean for one day. And the goal is to put the weight back on because that isn't healthy. That's not sustainable. That doesn't support performance and libido and health and all these things. Whereas the clients I work with, they're trying to lose weight and keep it off. They're not doing it for one day or one event. So how we get there is different. And their mindset needs to be different. Their approach to food needs to be different. And I understand the seduction in people seeing bodybuilders saying, oh, I want to be more muscular like them. I want to be leaner like them. And so they train like them and they eat like them and they live like them without realizing that actually bodybuilders go through these phases of intentional weight gain and then extreme weight loss, rinse and repeat. And that's really not what people are after.
Yeah.
So I think understanding that right from the get-go is important.
Yeah, awesome. And you guys seem to complement each other very well, where he just literally deals with that side and that's like his whole clientele, and you've got that side nailed. And I think after one of Dean's latest, I can't remember which one it was, his latest interviews, somebody followed me and I just sent the message saying, hi, how are you? How did you find out? And she's like, oh, Dean was on the podcast. I actually coached by Lizzie, and I can't remember her name, but she was just so complimentary about you and your coaching and how she just loves to pick your brain. So that's when I was like, yep, you were already on the list. And I was like, let's move her up because like we need to get her on ASAP.
I don't even know who to thank then, but that's lovely.
I'm going to look back through my messages after this. Maybe she's actually listening to the podcast and she can message me if I forget to message her, and she can let me know who it was. But definitely she mentioned you and spoke very highly of you and your coaching, mate. So awesome.
That's nice of her. Yeah, I've been working with people since 2008 now. So a long time, starting as a personal trainer. And the reason that Dean and I started Flex is as a personal trainer, everybody wants you to be everything. They want you to be their chiropractor and their psychologist and their nutritionist and the exercise expert. But we know that most of those things are outside of the scope of practice as a personal trainer. And I knew that, and I was careful to work within my scope of practice. So I would send people out to see a dietitian or a nutritionist or a psychologist or whatever they needed. And not only were people coming back to me not reaching their result, they were being harmed in the process. And Dean working in sports supplements at the time, people were coming in with these terrible diets and just after a fat burner. And we know that's not the answer either. So we decided to start Flex Success so that we could raise the industry standard and we could support people in the way that they wanted to be supported. And we could have collaborative relationships with them instead of this like hierarchy of, I'm the master, do as I say. And And the last thing we want is to flip B&As. And what I mean by that is a lot of coaches just try and get these amazing before and after pictures by crash dieting people, like, look what we did in 10 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
And the coach just leaves them in the deep end and blames them when they sink. And a huge part of our process is teaching people the skills and the tools that they need to be successful after coaching is over. And we think that it's our responsibility to make sure that people are reaching their goals in sustainable ways and in ways where other aspects of their lives aren't being harmed. Because who cares if you can lose 5 kilos if you're so grumpy that you have to get a divorce, or you can't eat out with your mates ever, or that's not the life for people either.
Yeah. And I think that leads nicely into where we're going to go with this. And I just wanted to pull it back because if you look on Flex, like, you guys still knock out incredible transformations, but it's not the be all and end all, I guess, is what you're trying to say. Like, clients get incredible results, but just without that push for crash dieting and, that 12-week mad, fat to shredded transformation, So it's a very sustainable approach, clearly. And that's what we're looking to talk about today, is how to approach sustainable dieting so you are set up for that sort of long-term success, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The first place to start for a lot of people is to get themselves out of the on a diet, off a diet mentality that a lot of people are in. And I can see that people think that there's probably one approach, and that is to go on a diet to lose weight. But if that diet is so restrictive that you can't do it for very long, what do you think is going to happen? What's the long-term plan? And so adjusting the mindset towards how can I go about reducing the calorie intake of my diet, but still make it enjoyable is the best way to start. It's not very sexy. It takes a little bit longer. Yeah. It takes a bit of trust and commitment to the process. But at the end of the day, there are no shortcuts really, because we can lose weight faster, but statistically speaking, people do not keep the weight off. They put it back on again, and then they keep entering this cycle of dieting, binging, yo-yo dieting, weight regain. And that's what we're trying to reduce with our clients.
Yeah. And do you find that's like hard to get that buy-in from them, or have you already sort of conditioned them with your content that that's what they're going to get? Because most people come to trainers and they want that, not fast result, but they want to get that result, and they're maybe thinking, oh, it'll take me 12 weeks, or they're going to be thinking, less than 6 months, but realistically it might take them that 6 months or a year to get to where they want to be if they do it in a sustainable way. Do you find it's hard to get that buy-in from them at the start, or how do you sort of navigate that?
Most of our clients have been following us online for a while, so I think they know what they're signing up for. Yeah. Not really. But there still are a few that slip through the cracks, and maybe they're just a referral from a friend and they have these expectations from The Biggest Loser, or I don't know, Jenny Craig ad or something, that they can lose 2 kilos a week. And they can, but risk of muscle loss is really high. Restriction is extremely high. Yeah. Your freedom and flexibility to eat out is really low, and other harms are probably going to be done. Yeah. Your recovery, your performance in the gym, really high mental preoccupation with food. So yeah, not we don't get it very much, but occasionally we do. And these are things that we like to jump on video call, because it's an online coaching service that we provide. We like to jump on these video calls with clients instead of via email and just have a face-to-face chat. Like, you tell me what your expectations are. Yeah. Okay, we can lose 2 kilos a week every week for 10 weeks if you want to, but these are the risks involved. And if we get informed consent with the client, yes, I know that my risk of binge eating is going to go up. My risk of not being able to keep this off is going to go up. But really, we don't come across people giving that informed consent. They're like, oh, I didn't realize those were all the risks involved in a crash diet like that. I just thought I could just get it off quickly, and there was no negatives. So just having open communication with people seems to be the way to go. Surprise, surprise.
Awesome. And what do you think is probably the biggest hurdle for that client who initially comes into this approach, like getting over that bump? Is it literally just explaining to them, like, these are the negatives? Like, do you want to avoid these negatives? We do it more sustainable, or how would you approach that sort of hurdle?
Well, we would do a needs assessment, I guess, and just see what the specific barrier is for them. But a lot of the time, people are very focused on the outcome, and they're really focused on perfection. And what they should be focused on is the process and on progress, not on perfection. And we know that weight fluctuates because we haven't gone to the toilet, or we have DOMs, or, you know, it's that time of the month, or whatever the reason is. And people might hop on the scales and go, I failed this week because the scale only went down 0.5 kilo instead of the 1 kilo target that we had. Yeah. Without realizing that, you know, the scales move for all sorts of reasons, but a successful or failed week isn't determined by the result. It's determined by the process. You know, did you sleep well? Did you, you know, consume within the parameters of nutrition that we discussed? Did you work out? Because we know that we're going to have some weeks where the scales are faster or slower. And that's not really up to us. All we can do is influence them, but we can't really control them. So I guess helping people shift their focus from the outcome to the process is huge. It's a real game changer for people, and letting people know that they're not a failure for not being perfect with absolutely everything. Because who is? Do you know anyone that is 100% of the time?
Definitely not. I'm definitely not anyway.
No, you and me both. So allowing people small slip ups without them feeling judged or without them feeling like failures can deliver a platform for people to continue forward, focusing on the things that matter, which is the process.
Awesome. And then let's dig into that process a little bit. So when you're starting off on a sustainable fat loss, what do you think are the first sort of key things that need to get moving and the client to understand to start getting wins and start feeling like, okay, I could actually do this, it's sustainable? How would you sort of set up those habits or the diet hacks or whatever the sort of first steps would be for you?
That's a tough one because it really is a needs assessment as well. But just a general statement might be giving somebody very strict parameters, like here's an exact meal plan. You must weigh everything. You may not eat any other vegetables than what's on this meal plan, isn't really setting the client up for success. So instead, giving them a loose plan to follow, some parameters to work within where they can feel successful, but still have some freedom to make food choices, can really set someone up to feel like they're ticking boxes and what next? What else can I tighten up?
Yeah.
And we can do that in many ways. Like we could give if somebody really doesn't have any idea of what to eat, we don't necessarily set the macros from the beginning because that's really helpful for a lot of people, but not absolutely necessary for everyone. We will set them up with something called the foundation diet, which just means they're working on the foundations of their diet. It's a really creative name, I know. And they're to have lean protein and veggies in every meal, and choose a carb and choose a fat. And there's different ways we can measure that. We can use our hand as a guide, which I think is actually from Precision Nutrition came up with the hand as a guide. So the thumb is the fat and like a scooped hand is the carbs. And we can use like a palm as the protein serve, or we can give parameters of like cup measurements or scale weight if people do want to be more accurate. So we set them up with a foundation diet, all these different ideas, like it could be a stir fry, it could be a bake, it could be a salad, it could be a wrap, like it could be all of these things, like eating vegetables and lean protein and have a carb, have a fat. It doesn't have to be boring. Yeah. And that lets people eat with their family as well, eat what their kids want to eat. And then we could also prescribe people what we call discretionary calories. So that, you know, chocolate doesn't fit within the foundation diet. Wine doesn't fit with the foundation diet. I personally don't think life is worth living without a bit of chocolate. And I get that other people love it too. And so how do people know how much is too much or not enough? Or so allowing clients discretionary calories, let's call it 200 a day, allows them to make choices. Do I want to eat this food for my 200 discretionary calories? And it could be like a whole big plate of, I don't know, yogurt or something they really enjoy. Or do I just want to have a few squares of chocolate, which means more to me? And in the process, they're learning about the caloric density of different foods.
I like that, just giving the calories out as those sort of flexible calories, because then it's quite easy to just look on the back of a bar of lint and just be like, okay, so 200 calories, I can look and see that that's 2-3 squares, whatever that number is. And it's quite easy for them to then, like you say, learn without having to go into MyFitnessPal and be like, right, 20 grams of this equals this. It's literally to look at the back. I've got 200 calories left at the end of the day from Lizzie. What can I spend it on? If you think of it like a bank, it's like, I've got this here. What's in the chocolate? So you're given that without being super strict on it. Needs to be 30 grams of carbs and 10 grams of fat to get those, 200 calories or whatever.
Because it's so unnecessary. We know that the most important things are protein and calories. If somebody wants a really specific result and they're trying to, cross all their T's and dot all their I's, maybe one of Dean's clients, a bodybuilder, that perhaps is really helpful. But for someone else, it's overwhelming and probably enough of a barrier to, they'll throw their hands up in the air and give up, and that's not what we want. But that's just one of a few ways that we could go about bringing a new client on board and helping them get some quick wins. There are plenty of other ways as well. Like if somebody really does like structure and wants a meal plan, we might give them food groups. So we have a food groups document, again, really creative name, and it lists, group 1 proteins, group 2 proteins, and group 1 proteins is anything that's below 5% fat. Group 2 is below 10, so on and so forth. And it might say between 150 and 200 grams of group 1 protein. And one day they might feel like prawns, another day chicken, another day turkey breast, whatever. So there's some room to move there as well. Although people really want meal plans. I get messages all the time. Hey, Lizzie, how much do you charge for a once-off meal plan? Like, you could not pay me enough to write you a once-off meal plan.
Yeah.
Because I am not doing any service to my clients or the people that are in my care by saying, here's one meal plan that you can eat forever. Like, what is that teaching them? It's teaching them 100%. How to be reliant on something. And that's not cool.
Yeah, 100%. I think the clients who maybe come to you and they're like, it happens to me a lot. I think it actually happened to me this morning where a new client came in and she's like, I feel like I need a meal plan just to get going, to follow something and get some wins. So I'll happily write her a meal plan, but in that first email with the meal plan will be the 1-hour video on flexible dieting that I recorded for the group and a PDF if she prefers to read about flexible dieting. So I'm saying like, this isn't sustainable, because otherwise what happens is, if I put something like salmon and sweet potato on as their dinner every night, after about 6 days, most people last eating that every night. And then they're like, oh, I'm getting sick of the salmon. Like, what can I put in instead? And they've got to ask for permission to eat something different. And then they've got to wait. If she messages me on a Tuesday night and I can't get to the change until a Wednesday afternoon to make the change, she's got to wait all that time before finding out what she's allowed to eat, which it doesn't work, right?
No, it doesn't work. And it also sets the client up with a really poor mentality towards food, because food is, if it's on the plan, it's good. If it's off the plan, it's bad food. Or I'm allowed to, or I'm not allowed to. I've been good, I've been bad. And we don't want to attach those moral judgments to food or to ourselves by the things that we eat.
Yeah, 100%. So with that in mind, because that's a good little change of pace here, with regards to like untracked meals or free meals or cheat meals in quotation marks for the guys in the podcast, we don't like calling them those, but how do you factor that in for a normal lifestyle client who maybe wants something more flexible? They can have a meal with the kids or their partner on the weekend, and they want to get this result, but they also want to have that freedom then.
If somebody is having like yum cha or something that's really hard to track, for example, like what a nightmare that would be, yum cha. It's probably like, it really does depend on the person. So again, it's kind of a tricky one to answer, but giving yum cha as an example, we could just estimate that meal might be 1,000 calories, right? Like we'll just ask them to eat sensibly if they're not going to track it, if they are tracking macros, that is. Always go for steamed over fried, like those things, but maybe adjust the meals before the meals in that day before that meal. So maybe breakfast and lunch, they might take out their fats and they might replace their rice for potato. So they're reducing calories there to allow more here. It might not be exact because we can't count it, but if they needed to be exact, they wouldn't be going out to yum cha in the first place. They might be having like a steak somewhere, like, it says on the menu that it's 200 grams. Ask the chef to cook it with no oil, But if somebody is macro tracking, we would just expect them to macro track it. And there's great resources online like Guzman and Gomez or McDonald's or Red Rooster or Porto's or Grilled, they all have their macros online. If we're going to like a local cafe that doesn't have their macros online, most places don't, we could either deconstruct the meal by saying, the bread of this burger is about this many grams, the meat's about this many grams, it's probably 20% fat. We'll ask for sauce on the side so we can control that portion. So we can deconstruct it. Or if it's very similar, like that burger example, to something that you might get at Grilled, you could just look through the Grilled menu and go, the burger was most similar to this one, and these are the macros on the Grilled website. A free meal, though, is a little different again. A free meal would only exist in the environment where somebody is following a strict plan and they have one meal off plan. A free meal doesn't really make sense in the context of macro tracking because they would just track that meal. So if somebody is following a strict plan and they were having a free meal, it would depend if it was crunch time and they were right at the end of the deadline of when they wanted to make, a weight loss result or something like that. But generally we would give guidelines like, we don't want to enter a tempting situation very hungry. So before you go out for this free meal, which we're going to eat within sensible boundaries, we might want to engage in something called preloading. So that might be not being full before you go, but not being starving. Have some fruits, have some vegetables, maybe a protein shake if you're going to go out and share a pizza with your partner and it's going to be low protein. So there's a few different ways depending on the context of the diet and where they are in their journey.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's some good, clear strategies for people who do want to fit these in. So that's awesome. What about when you're taking the sustainable dieting approach? Obviously, people are going to hit weeks where it's slower progress, maybe complete plateaus, and obviously weeks where it's also going to be faster progress. How do you sort of get people to mentally manage that? And also, if they do hit a plateau, how often would you look at chopping something up? Would you take the approach of, let's just wait and see if there's maybe fat loss around the corner, wait another week or two? Or how often would you make a change in that scenario?
For women, their weight can be highly dependent on that time of the month. And so we obviously have a tracking sheet where people pop in their weights, like their scale bathroom weight. And I get my clients to flag when they're on their period. And then after about 4 months, we can see if there's a trend. Can we expect, even if you're eating in a deficit and you're being compliant, that weight might stabilize or even go up? And then there's a big crash after. And so showing people that it's not that the plan's not working, or it's not that, you haven't done something right, but these are the general trends. That could be one way. But also, I think it's the coach can play a big role in that by not always celebrating scale weight. We like to maybe say, oh, how great that the scales moved more than predicted this week or something. It might be a passing comment, but we like to focus on the process variables. So daily steps, minimum fruit and vegetable targets, maybe food quality, sleep, things like that. And we like to celebrate how well the client has done with their process variables, because we know that's the biggest influencer on the outcome. And I think that helps the clients determine how they see success or failure. And then they put less emphasis on scale weight because we have, and we're a huge influencing factor for them. But of course, there are some people who, and rightly so, they've put in the work all week. Maybe they dealt with pretty high levels of hunger because it was, at the end of their diet just before a refeed or something like that. And they're so frustrated that they put all this work in, and by the end of the week, their weekly average isn't down. And so the easiest thing to do is just to remind them that if we average out your weight lost this week, last week, the one before that, and the one before that, your average still aligns with our expectations.
Yep.
It's just if you lost weight as per weekly expectations this week, the average over the last month would have been much higher than our expectations. So we like to zoom out and show people the bigger picture, even though they can feel bogged down in the moment. Yeah,
that's awesome. And that's very applicable for a lot of people who kind of not only through coaching, but like doing this by themselves will have those moments where they'll hit a plateau and suddenly start to, hate on themselves and suddenly, restrict more, or let's up cardio for the fun of it just because, we've hit a plateau this week and we're meant to be losing X amount per week. So I think that's something that people can take straight on board. And I think that's actually what I'm going to clip out from this show. I've been writing down timestamps. That's one of the biggest things. So that I've got about 6 of them here, but that could be up there with the big one here. So.
Oh, well, I hope that this episode beats Dean's then. It's a race.
Oh, absolutely. We'll be on that. One other thing, Lizzie, I wanted to talk about, because Dean kind of touched it when he was talking about how to make the off-season eating, like the calorie load, more appealing in terms of what food you can put in to make the meals more enticing when you've got a high calorie load. What about for somebody who is dieting, obviously like Gen Pop person who's coming in to lose, say, 5 to 10 kilos and their calories are on the lower side, obviously. Have you got any tips and tricks for food combos or different things to think about that might make those meals, or maybe some swaps or different things?
There's so many things running through my mind right now. I feel like I need to bullet point this down so I don't forget some things. We're going to start at the hedonic staircase of dieting.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, and food swaps. Cool. So the hedonic staircase of dieting, I believe, is a term coined by, is it Mike Israetel? Definitely Renaissance periodization. And it suggests that the higher your calorie needs, usually people who are going through intentional weight gain, should have more palatable foods. So they might want to choose things that have a combination of carbs and fats within it, which is considered a hyperpalatable food. We tend to eat more of it because it's more delicious. It can trigger hunger and cravings faster than if we ate something that wasn't highly palatable. And they might also want to swap between sweet and savory to avoid what we call palate fatigue, because we can only eat so much white potato before we get bored. But if we swap between, I don't know, white potato and some other delicious food and go back to potato, we might be able to fit more in. Now, if somebody has very low calorie needs, particularly if that's combined with a high appetite, they would have an easier time restricting their calories if they ate on the lower end of the hedonic staircase of dieting. So they ate foods that they weren't gagging on it, but it was all right. If we have a plate of pizza and it was so delicious, it's hard to stop at 200 calories. But if I have a plate of steamed veggies, some poached chicken, maybe a bit of salt and pepper, it was fine. I'm happy to stop after that meal was over. I'm full. And that can really help people eat within their parameters without feeling like they're flexing their willpower all the time to stop. Now, the next thing to consider is food volume, because obviously the hungrier we are, the more likely we are to overeat. And so an easy way to stay full is to choose foods. So here we're moving on to food selection. Choose foods that offer us greater volume. Maybe they're more fibrous as well, but for the same or fewer calories. As an example, pumpkin has 7% carbs, or 7 grams of carbs per 100 grams, whereas sweet potato has 14, so literally double. If I'm cutting my carbs in half for that meal, I could just cut the amount of sweet potato in half that I'm eating. Or what I could do, I could eat the same amount of that starchy food, but just choose pumpkin instead. So I'm still eating the same amount of food, but my carbs have halved. We published a book recently, Flex Success that is, that I authored called Untangling Fat Loss. And there's a whole section dedicated to food selection, because this is such an important piece of the puzzle for people, not just the hedonic staircase of dieting, but food selection. And I think once people get this right, and counting your macros can be a great teacher in which foods to choose, can be a game changer for sure. Awesome.
There's loads in there, and we're gonna have to throw up the plug for that at the end of this for the book, because I reckon that's gonna be huge for a lot of people. I think I was a shit friend and told Dean I was going to buy it after one podcast, and then mentioned on the next podcast that I hadn't bought it yet, and then I still hadn't bought it by the time it came out, and he was like, "You're still a shit friend."
Have you bought it now?
I went and bought it now, and I've also bought a second ebook to make up for the fact that I was such a shit friend.
Oh, you bought our Life After Dieting ebook
Yeah,
as well.
I bought both of them, so I just need to dig into those. So,
oh, well, you're forgiven then.
yeah, absolutely. I should be all redeemed in Flex Success Heights.
You are.
One other thing I was just writing down there was, what about people like sauces, right? Whether it's a bit of ketchup or barbecue sauce or stuff. If somebody is going down a sustainable route, do you get them to still look into tracking that, or do you give them a rough guideline on, maybe like sauce swaps or portion control in terms of how much to put on your plate or whatever? How do you deal with sauces?
If somebody comes to me and they have maintenance calories of 5,000 and they can lose weight on 4,000, there's a lot of room for sauces in 4,000. So for that person, usually men, sauce swaps aren't typically necessary. They just need to drink a couple beers less and swap their real Cokes for Coke Zeros,
Yeah.
Whereas little people like me, I'm 60 kilos and have the maintenance calories of all of, between 1,800 and 2,100 calories, depending on how active I am that week.
Yep.
Sauce swaps are really handy for me. Fountain have a no added sugar barbecue sauce, which is nowhere near as good as smoky barbecue sauce.
Yeah.
Sometimes I use a smoky barbecue sauce, but it just means that I have to take it from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or I lean on herbs or lemon juice, or garlic, if anyone's okay with having garlic breath, or other ways to flavor food that isn't so calorically dense.
Okay.
But also because my energy needs are low and my appetite is high. Not necessarily my hunger, but I really enjoy eating. Like, I don't know if you want to call it cravings. I just generally think about food a lot. I can't afford to be using high calorie sources unless I'm okay with just eating less, and I'm not. So I've done a bit of a needs analysis there and decided what's most important to me. And so lemon juice it is. It's all good.
Yeah, awesome. So in terms of that, like you mentioned about the activity levels, and like you're kind of at the stage now where you can auto regulate, like, so you've had a more like higher activity, you've pushed more in the gym, or you've done more steps because you've been out walking more, and you're able to sort of intuitively go between that 18 to 2100. At what stage do you think a client can start to become aware of this within their journey? Say if a client stays with you for, let's say, 2 years, at what stage in the sustainable fat loss model that you've got are they educated enough to sort of intuitively maybe change calories based on activity levels? Because that's something that maybe just whenever you mention that, the people are like, oh, I'd love to be able to do that, but it's quite, I guess, hard to do for most people.
It's probably micromanaging. When I move more, my hunger goes up a little bit with it. And so intuitively, when I move more, I just tend to eat a little bit more. Our goal with a client is not to hang on to them forever. Our goal is they come to us at whatever stage they're in. We go through whatever process we need to go through to reach a goal sustainably without causing any harm. And before they leave, we try and encourage what we call informed eating, which is what the Life After Dieting ebook, our first ebook, is all about. It's helping people put MyFitnessPal away and make informed choices about their nutrition. So they would be eating as if they were tracking macros, but they're not.
Yeah.
And the 3 pillars of informed eating is understanding your specific nutritional needs, and definitely through coaching, they will understand that. Understand nutrition, and either through the foundation diet or macro tracking or some combination of the both, they'll understand what foods have what macros and how many calories and which ones keep them full. And also honoring your preferences, because it's all good to say these are the foods that are going to keep you full and fit within your calories, but you might hate them. So how long are you going to do that for? So we need to be eating in a way that suits our preferences to an extent. I mean, I'd love to eat Cadbury for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but that's not exactly what I mean by eating to preferences. And so we want people to be, I don't really like the word eating intuitively, only because intuitively we're hardwired to seek calorically dense food or hyperpalatable foods. So if I was just to, and maybe you're using the term differently to how I think a lot of people use it, we like to say informed eating. So we're making informed choices using those 3 pillars on our individual needs, on our knowledge of nutrition and on our personal preferences. And as we enter the final days with our clients, usually far earlier than 2 years, we help them move away from macro tracking and give them informed eating days. So it might just be 1 within the week, and then it might be 2 within the week. And we'll monitor body weight. We'll monitor those process variables. Like, did you still manage to eat 400 grams of vegetables within the day? Did you still manage to eat your fruit? How easy was it for you to do that? Is it just a habit now that you just choose an apple and it just seems like it's on autopilot? Those are the types of things we look at. And we want people to walk away feeling like they got this and they don't really have to try that hard anymore. It's just life.
Awesome. And when you get to that spot, then it's pretty much job done, like they've got the result, they're educated, and it's literally like if they need to stay for whatever reason, you're happy to keep them on. But it's like you're more than happy to see them go because they're so educated that you've had that massive impact on their life.
Yeah. A lot of people, because they have had success with macro tracking, are hesitant to give it up because they feel like this is the thing that got me here. This is the thing that's kept me here. If I put MFP away, I'm going to go back to what I was before. But so much more now. You have different habits now. Just because something was right for you in that moment doesn't mean that you're married to it. It doesn't have to be right for you forever. And I think it takes a bit of bravery to step away from something that's done so much for you. But there's a lot to be gained.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think that's an awesome place to end it. So what I want to do is, if people don't know how to follow you or how to find you, like to hit you up about coaching or to jump on a Zoom call to discuss their own dieting and how you can have an impact, how do they get in touch and what's the next steps?
Well, flexsuccess.com.au, you can book consult calls from there with me, Dean, Chelsea, or Tom, the other Flex coaches. But it's probably worth mentioning here, though, that after 12 years in the industry, I'm staying in the industry, but my role is actually moving away from working one-on-one with people, and I'm building course education content, starting with macros, how to set and adjust, and moving into mindset and a whole bunch of other subtopics, habit change, things like that. So if anybody wanted to have a one-on-one conversation, we can still do that via consultations. But if you think that ongoing attention is what you need, then the other Flex coaches are very capable. So flexsuccess.com.au, or we're on Instagram. I believe it's flex_success.
I think so, yeah.
Perhaps. My personal Instagram is Lizzie_Rawdah. I wish I had a more simple last name, so I'll spell that out. Rawdah. I use Smith when I have coffee orders and they ask for a last name. They're the best place. Or my address, if you want to pop over with a cake or something, is 123 Gaines Street.
If only we could just do that, just throw out our address and people came around with cake, right?
It's worth a try.
Yeah. Mate, so thank you very much for your time. I think we've been on about 45-ish minutes, and I really do think this one has tons of value for people. So I really do hope you're challenging Dean in a couple of weeks' time for those top spots, and see if you can knock them off.
I hope so too. It's
awesome.
On, Dean.
Well, thank you for your time, and you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining me on today's episode of The O Show. If you know somebody who needs to hear this episode today, please share this with them via message or on social media. Don't forget to also take a screenshot and share it on your story and tag me at Oren McCorry so we can continue to grow the podcast and help more people change their lives with the advice given here. Also, keep the 5-star reviews coming over on iTunes, as that helps people who normally wouldn't listen to the show find it and get The O Show in their ears and drive the podcast forward to help more people around the world with the advice here. Have a great day, and I will speak to you soon.